Hi, I'm Mike Hodgetts from Delving Designs, and in this short tutorial for Blender we're going to look at 3 quick and simple techniques that can solve 90% of the problems that you can run into when modelling, shading or just generally working in Blender. I have here a vase model that I've created that we can use to demonstrate some of the problems and how to avoid them. If we have a look at the mesh, it's just a simple kind of mesh with this kind of concertina style scaling on the edges. I've got a subdivision surface modifier and a solidify modifier as well. So let's jump straight in and have a look at the first problem. The first problem that we're going to look at is overlapping or duplicate geometry. If I turn on this second one here, you'll see that it is completely messed up. But if we look at the mesh, it's exactly the same as this one. If we shift select both of them and have a look at these, it looks exactly the same. So why are we having this horrible distortion here? If we turn off our modifiers, we can see that it's an issue with the modifiers. But the problem is actually that if we look at this vertex here, for instance, just press G to grab it, there's actually a duplicate one right underneath it. This can happen sometimes when if you're extruding, and for instance, if I just grab this one, press E to extrude, and then I right click and cancel that transformation, and then I forget about it or I don't undo it, when I go back out, we might have the same sort of problems. Let's do the same thing here. Now we can see we're creating these problems. Maybe if I grab this face, press E to extrude and forget about it, you can now see that we've got this sort of bulging effect here. If we turn on off our subdivision surfaces, we can see again there's some horrible shading issues as well. Having overlapping or duplicate geometry can cause all sorts of problems, and it's really, really simple to fix. We're just going to select everything with A, I'm going to press M to merge, and we're going to merge by distance. And you can see down here, we've now removed 1,479 vertices. If we go back out into object mode, it's now exactly the same as this one, and we've fixed those problems. The second issue that we're going to look at is issues with our face normals. So before I turn on this one and show you the problems, let's have another look at our original. If we go up here to our overlays, click this little drop down, we can turn on face orientation. And what this is going to do is show us the direction that all of our face normals are pointing. All of these are blue and the insides is red, and that is saying that the normal is pointing in this direction. And in fact, if we go back to our overlays, under our mesh overlays here, we can actually turn on the direction of our normals and we can see which way our normals are pointing. And as I said, this is just the direction of the faces. You want to always ensure that your normals are pointing outwards. They are not pointing inside or away from the camera. If that makes sense, away from your viewport. They should always be pointing out of your geometry, not inside. Let's turn this off for the moment, and let's have a look at what can happen when your normals are distorted. Look at this crazy mess. Even if we turn off our solidify and our subsurf, this is now an issue with our shading. If I shade it as flat, so just right click and change the shading to flat rather than smooth, it looks perfectly fine. Well, obviously it looks very low poly, but it looks okay. Shade it smooth, we now have all of these problems and this horrible distorting effect. If we go into edit mode, turn back on our face selection, you can see that all of the problems are arising from where these faces are shaded red under our face orientation. So the subsurf isn't really going to do too much. But when we turn our solidify on our solidify modifier, we have an offset value. And this is telling Blender which way to push the new faces in the solidify. That offset is going to be based on your surface normals. So if we look here, we're going to have all sorts of problems. Let's go back into edit mode, select everything, and to solve this, we're just going to press Shift N, which is going to recalculate our normals. And now, all of those problems have gone away. You may find, however, that sometimes that doesn't necessarily work. And that your normals might still be a little bit messed up. So what instead I'm going to do, just to demonstrate, if I select one of the faces, press Shift G, which brings up select similar, and get these normals, select normal, that's now going to select the faces that are aligned along their normals. Notice how it hasn't selected this face, even though it's selecting all this chain of them, because this face is pointed opposite. We can now press Alt and N and flip them. Obviously, this is a more manual way of doing things, selecting the normals and flipping them. But that's how you can do it if just pressing Shift and N won't work. Now, here, it's now shown me all red. Well, now I can just select everything, Alt N, and flip it. So you want to always ensure that when you're looking in the face orientation, with face orientation overlays on, that everything is blue and not red. For our third and final quick thing that we can look at, I want to have a look at scaling. So here, again, we have exactly the same thing, but if we look at our original, and we look at let's just move this one over to here, and we look at the base of them, the neck of this bars, we've got this kind of horrible oval shape. It's not really the solidify modifier isn't acting the way that we would like. And that is because of our scaling. If we press N to bring up our properties toolbar, if we go to item, you can see here that the scale is 10, 4, and 0.2. On this one, it's 1, 1, and 1. Your scale, your object scale, should always be 1. If you want to manipulate the scale of an object, you should either A, do it in edit mode, or B, you need to apply your scale, which is what we're about to do now. Select this object, Control and A to apply, and we're going to apply the scale. This resets it back to 1, applying the transformation, and we now don't have that issue. Having your objects at a kind of a scale that isn't 1 on all the axes not only can affect this sort of stuff, but it will also affect some of the tools that you use within edit mode as well. If we have a look at this cube, I've got this cube and I've just scaled it by 5 on the x-axis and then scaled it back down in edit mode to show you what can happen, because when we look at this, we might not necessarily think that there's a problem. Yeah, it's a cube, fine. Go into edit mode with tab, and let's try and do a bevel, for instance. So if we select this edge, press Control B, this one's okay, because it's along my axis. But let's select all 3 of these. That is not working how we would expect. The same thing with insets, for instance. If I select this face and press I to inset it, well, that's not what the inset should look like. Inset should look like this, where all of the transformations are even across all of the axes. But when I inset this face, we're getting some distortion and stretching, and that is because of the scale. Apply the scale, and now if I inset, it works perfectly fine. If I bevel, I'm just going to undo all this actually, just to get it back to where it was. Apply the scale, and now if I bevel, that's exactly the sort of bevel that I would expect. So yeah, I hope that this tutorial was useful for you. To recap, you always want to make sure that you are removing any duplicate geometry by pressing M in edit mode and merging by distance. You always want to check your face normals and apply your scale. Doing these 3 simple steps will solve so many of your problems. Anytime I run into an issue, I always just run through that checklist of doing those 3 things, and 90% of the time it solves the problem I was having. If this was useful for you, please do give this video a big thumbs up, and please do consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks.